Welcome to another deep dive, and today we're tackling something called Mindsight. It might sound a bit, I don't know, kind of abstract or even a little woo-woo, but stick with me. Okay.
Absolutely. It's actually fascinating when you start to peel back the layers.
Okay, so think about it this way. We all know about the five senses, right? Sight, smell, all that good stuff. They help us experience the world, right?
Yeah, like our connection to everything around us.
Exactly. So mind sight is kind of like a sixth sense. It's this ability to understand what's going on inside, both our own minds and the minds of others.
It's like having this internal radar that helps us navigate the complex world of thoughts, feelings, and relationships.
So it's like an owner's manual for the brain almost, like helping us make sense of, all the chaos up there.
That's a great analogy. And what's even cooler is that it's grounded in actual neuroscience.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about some vague concept here. This stuff is real.
Okay, so if we can understand mind sight, can we actually use it to, make our lives better?
Absolutely. We can use it to boost our emotional balance, build stronger relationships, and even improve our physical health. It's really quite remarkable.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. So let's say this mind sight, this sixth sense, gets damaged somehow, like through an injury or something. What happens then?
Well, let me tell you about Barbara. Barbara experienced brain damage that really impaired her ability for mindsight, and it had a devastating impact on her life. Before her injury, Barbara was known for being this incredibly warm and emotionally present person.
So, like, she was really in tune with other people's emotions.
Exactly. She was a loving mom, completely attuned to her daughter Leanne's needs, always there for her. But after the injury, everything changed. It was like a different person.
Wow, that's pretty scary. So how did she change? What did losing mindsight actually look like in her day-to-day life?
So picture this. Leanne comes to Barbara, totally upset because her ponytail is crooked,
Mhm.
like little kid
Yeah,
problems.
yeah, totally.
Before the injury, Barbara would comfort her, fix the ponytail, just made her feel better. But after the brain damage, Barbara barely even registered Leanne's distress.
Oh, wow.
She would look at the crooked ponytail with this blank expression and just carry on with whatever she was doing.
That's heartbreaking. So it's not just forgetting things or like losing physical abilities, it's losing something, I don't know, deeper, like that fundamental ability to connect.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about losing the ability to understand and respond to the emotions of herself and others.
So this brain damage, it affected a specific part of her brain.
Exactly. The damage in Barbara's case was located in the middle prefrontal cortex, which plays a crucial role in mindsight.
Okay, so what does that part of the brain actually do?
Well, think of it as the control center for empathy, emotional balance, and attuned communication. All the things that are essential for connecting with ourselves and with others.
So when that area is damaged, it kind of throws the whole system out of whack.
Exactly. It disrupts what we call the triangle of well-being,
Mhm.
the mind, the brain, and relationships, and it throws everything off balance.
Okay, I'm starting to get how all these pieces fit together. So Barbara's story, it really highlights just how important mindset is. But I think a lot of us, myself included, might be wondering, what about those times when we lose our cool? Does that have anything to do with mindset too? Those moments where we just snap?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those everyday moments when we lose it, those are totally connected to mindset. In fact, remember that story you shared about the crepe meltdown with your kid?
Oh, yeah, the infamous crepe incident.
We can analyze that whole situation through the lens of mindsight, and it'll give us some really valuable insights.
Okay, so the crepe incident. It all started, well, it seemed harmless enough, right? Just a chess match between my two sons.
Right. Sibling rivalry, the classic setup.
Exactly. And then things escalated when one of them ended up with a slightly smaller piece of crepe.
Ah, the age-old battle for equal portions.
Oh. It's a serious issue. But honestly, I was already feeling stressed that day, and then seeing them bicker over this tiny little piece of crepe, I don't know, it just set me over the edge. I totally lost it. Yelling, overreacting in a way that I, looking back, deeply regret.
We've all been there. It's like our brains just short-circuit.
Yeah, exactly. Like a total system crash.
Well, that feeling of short-circuiting, that's actually your brain switching from what we call the high road to the low road. Imagine your brain has these two pathways.
Okay, two roads.
Right. The high road is, thoughtful, rational. It lets you respond calmly, even when things get tough.
Okay, the calm and collected route. Got it.
Exactly. The low road, on the other hand, it's all about quick reactions, fight, flight, or freeze. And it takes over when we feel threatened or overwhelmed.
So in the heat of the crepe meltdown, my brain basically took a detour onto the low road, like completely bypassing all rational thought.
Precisely. And when that happens, several key functions of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps us make good decisions, they basically go offline.
So like all the control systems just shut down.
You got it.
Oh.
For example, you lose response flexibility. So you're stuck in that one reaction. You can't adapt to the situation. You also lose emotional balance, which is why a tiny trigger like the crepe can cause such a huge reaction.
It's like all my carefully honed parenting skills just flew out the window.
And here's another layer to all of this. Our past experiences, they can really influence how we react in the present. You mentioned feeling stressed that day. Were there any past experiences, maybe from your own childhood, that might have been amplifying your reaction to the crepe situation?
It's funny you should mention that. I have a brother, and we used to fight constantly over the smallest things when we were kids. I'm wondering if some of that old sibling rivalry, got triggered in that moment, like unconsciously fueling my meltdown.
That's a great insight. It highlights how even seemingly insignificant moments, like a crepe disagreement, can tap into these deeper emotional patterns that we might not even be aware of. And understanding these patterns, well, that's a crucial part of developing mindsight.
Okay, so we've got this like hidden world of emotions and memories influencing our reactions.
Exactly. And Mindsight gives us the tools to start exploring that world and understanding how it shapes our lives.
This is already blowing my mind. I can't wait to dive deeper into this, but we're going to have to save that for our next deep dive session.
Looking forward to it.
I am too. This is fascinating stuff. Okay, so we've got these like hidden worlds of emotions and memories influencing our reactions.
Exactly. And Mindsight gives us the tools to start exploring that world and understanding how it shapes our lives.
This is already blowing my mind. But let's go back to those low road moments. It's like those old patterns, they're kind of lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to set them off.
That's a great way to put it. It's like those old tapes are still playing in the background, even if we're not consciously aware of them.
So it's not like we're just, doomed to repeat those patterns forever. We can actually change them.
Absolutely. Mindsight gives us the power to recognize those patterns and choose a different response. It's not about being perfect, but about becoming more aware and intentional in our actions.
But how do we actually do that? How do we shift from that reactive low road mode back to the thoughtful high road? Like in the middle of a meltdown, how do I hit the brakes?
That's where reflection and repair come in. After a low road moment, it's essential to take some time to cool down, step away from the situation and then reflect on what happened. Remember the three components of reflection: openness, observation, and objectivity.
Okay, remind me, what are those again?
Openness means being willing to look at the situation with a curious and non-judgmental mind. Observation involves paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and even your bodily sensations during the event. And objectivity is about stepping back and seeing the situation from a wider perspective without getting caught up in your own story, trying to see the bigger picture.
So instead of beating myself up over the crepe meltdown, I need to approach the situation with curiosity. Pay attention to what was happening inside me and try to see the bigger picture, like zoom out a little bit.
Exactly. It's about getting curious about your own reactions instead of just getting swept away by them.
Okay, that makes sense. So once I've cooled down and reflected, what's next?
Then comes the repair part. This involves taking responsibility for your actions, acknowledging the impact they had on others, and finding ways to make things right. It's about acknowledging the hurt that you caused and taking steps to mend those relationships.
In my case, that meant apologizing to my sons, explaining that my reaction was out of line, and talking to them about healthier ways to handle disagreements, trying to turn it into a learning experience.
That's a perfect example of repair in action. You're not just smoothing things over, you're using the experience as an opportunity for growth and learning, both for yourself and for your kids.
Okay, so we've talked about why Mindsight matters, how crucial it is for understanding ourselves and others. And we've touched on how to get back on track after those low road moments, those meltdowns. But I'm really curious about the how. How do we actually cultivate this Mindsight superpower? Like, are we born with it or can we develop it?
That brings us to the amazing world of neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to change and adapt throughout our lives. So the good news is, we're not stuck with the brain we were born with. We can actually rewire it for greater mindsight.
Wait, so you're telling me we can actually change our brains, like physically change the structure of our brains?
Absolutely. Think of it like physical exercise. If you lift weights, your muscles get stronger.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Similar, If you engage in activities that promote mindsight, those neural connections in your brain will get stronger too. It's like building mental muscles for greater awareness, empathy, and compassion.
Okay, so what kind of activities are we talking about? Give me some examples of how we can actually train our brains for mindsight. What can I do starting today?
Well, mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools we have. It's like a superpower for the mind.
Mindfulness. We hear that word everywhere these days. Can you break it down for me? Like, what does it actually mean to be mindful?
At its core, mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about noticing your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without getting swept away by them. It's like learning to watch those thoughts and feelings come and go without getting caught up in the drama.
So instead of getting hijacked by my emotions, I'm learning to just observe them, like step back and watch the show without getting involved in the plot.
Exactly. And as you do that, you start to create a space between you and those thoughts and feelings. You're not identifying with them so strongly anymore. You're becoming the observer.
Okay, so I'm not trying to control my thoughts or force myself to feel happy. I'm simply observing the natural flow of my experience. But how does that actually change my brain?
Well, let's look at an example. Imagine a violinist practicing for hours every day. Over time, the areas of their brain responsible for finger control and coordination, they actually expand and become more developed.
So their brain actually changes shape based on their practice. That's amazing.
The same thing happens with mindfulness. When you practice regularly, you're strengthening those neural connections in your brain that are responsible for mindsight, for awareness, attention, and emotional regulation.
So just like that violinist builds stronger fingers, I can build a stronger mind by practicing mindfulness.
Exactly. It's like going to the gym for your brain.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit skeptical. Can mindfulness really make a difference in those really tough cases where people are struggling with, intense emotional challenges? Like, can it really help someone who's dealing with, say, anxiety or depression?
It absolutely can. Let me tell you about Jonathan, a teenager who was grappling with really severe mood swings and dysregulation. He was experiencing intense anger, deep sadness, and even suicidal thoughts.
Wow, that's incredibly difficult.
Jonathan's situation was incredibly challenging, and his family was really looking for solutions. They were considering medication, but they also wanted to explore non-pharmaceutical options. So they decided to give mindfulness training a try.
So instead of jumping straight to medication, they opted for a more holistic approach, focusing on training the mind.
Exactly. And it's important to note that this was a shared decision made with Jonathan's full involvement and consent. They found a therapist specializing in mindfulness-based interventions for teens, and Jonathan started attending weekly sessions.
What exactly did those mindfulness sessions involve? What kind of things was Jonathan doing?
Well, one of the core practices was focused attention on the breath. Jonathan was instructed to sit comfortably, close his eyes, and simply notice the sensation of his breath as it entered and left his body. It sounds simple, right? But it's actually a very powerful technique for cultivating awareness.
So instead of trying to control his thoughts or force himself to feel happy, Jonathan was just paying attention to his breath. How did that help him with his mood swings?
Well, as Jonathan practiced focusing on his breath, he started to notice that his thoughts would wander. He'd get distracted by worries about school, anxieties about his social life, or memories of painful experiences. But instead of getting caught up in those thoughts, he learned to gently redirect his attention back to his breath.
So it's like he was training his mind to stay present, to resist getting pulled into the past or the future?
Precisely. And as he did that, he began to notice a shift. He realized that his thoughts and emotions weren't permanent fixtures, they were more like passing clouds in the sky.
So he was creating a sense of space around those thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. He wasn't so identified with them anymore. He was developing a sense of spaciousness, a feeling that he wasn't defined by his moods. He could observe them without being consumed by them.
Okay, that's starting to make sense. So mindfulness helped Jonathan create a sense of distance from those overwhelming thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And as he became more skilled at observing his thoughts and emotions, he also became more aware of the sensations in his body. He noticed that when he was angry, his chest would tighten, his heart would race, and his fists would clench.
It's like he was learning to read the language of his body.
Precisely. And with that awareness, he began to have more choices in how to respond. Instead of lashing out in anger, he could take a few deep breaths, notice the sensations in his body, and choose a calmer course of action.
So mindfulness was like giving him an internal pause button, a way to interrupt those automatic reactions and create space for a more thoughtful response. But how did that actually change his brain? Like, were there actual physical changes happening in his brain as a result of these mindfulness practices?
Yes, there were. One of the key areas that mindfulness strengthens is the connection between the prefrontal cortex, the executive control center of the brain, and the amygdala, which is responsible for processing emotions, especially fear and anger.
So, mindfulness strengthens the communication pathway between the thinking part of the brain and the feeling part of the brain.
That's a great way to put it. And this is where it gets really interesting, Kiss. Mindfulness also promotes the growth of the hippocampus, which is vital for learning and memory.
Wait, so not only does mindfulness help us manage our emotions, but it also boosts our cognitive abilities.
That's right. And these changes in the brain were reflected in Jonathan's story. Over time, his mood swings became less intense, he was able to manage his anger more effectively, and he experienced fewer episodes of depression. His relationships with his family and friends improved, and he felt more hopeful about his future.
That's amazing. It's like mindfulness rewires the brain for greater well being.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual well-being either. Remember those resonance circuits we talked about? Mindsight can also impact our relationships and even society as a whole.
Okay, so how does that work? How does my individual practice of mindsight affect other people?
Well, remember those resonance circuits we discussed earlier? When we engage in mindful, compassionate interactions with others, we're actually activating those circuits in their brains as well. So it's like we're spreading those positive vibes, those feelings of connection and understanding. And those ripple effects can have a profound impact on our communities and even the world as a whole.
It's pretty powerful stuff. It's like we're all interconnected and our individual actions can actually make a difference.
Exactly. And when we cultivate mindsight, we're not just changing our own lives, we're contributing to a more compassionate and interconnected world.
Okay, I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep exploring this mindsight thing. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on one more thing. You mentioned earlier that mindsight has the potential to impact our physical health as well. Can you tell me more about that? How does this all connect to our bodies?
Absolutely. We've talked about the connection between the mind and brain, but the body is an integral part of this equation as well. In fact, there's a whole field of research called psychoneuroimmunology that explores the intricate connections between our thoughts, emotions, and immune system.
Okay, so you're telling me that my thoughts and feelings can actually affect my immune system.
That's right. Studies have shown that stress, anxiety, and negative emotions can suppress the immune system, making us more susceptible to illness. On the other hand, positive emotions like joy, gratitude, and compassion can actually boost the immune system, enhancing our resilience and overall well-being.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So it's not just about feeling better mentally and emotionally, it's about actually strengthening our body's defenses.
Exactly. And mindfulness practices in particular have been shown to have a profound impact on physical health. They can help reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, improve sleep quality, and even slow down the aging process.
So it's like mindfulness is a superpower for both our minds and our bodies.
Precisely. And it all comes back to that integration piece we've been talking about. When we cultivate mindsight, we're creating greater harmony and balance within ourselves, between our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. And that integration, that wholeness, is the foundation for true well-being.
So it's like mindfulness is a superpower for both our minds and our bodies.
Precisely. And it all comes back to that integration piece we've been talking about. When we cultivate mindsight, we're creating greater harmony and balance within ourselves between our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. And that integration, that wholeness, is the foundation for true well-being.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on the power of the mind.
I'm so glad to hear that.
But before we wrap up, I'd love to bring it back down to earth a little, make it practical. You mentioned earlier that mindsight is a skill. So what are some concrete steps we can take to start cultivating it in our own lives? Like, what can I do starting today to boost my mindsight?
That's a great question. It's like we've been admiring this amazing landscape, and now it's time to actually learn the trails. The first step is simply becoming aware of your own mind. Pay attention to your thoughts and emotions throughout the day. Notice how they influence your actions and interactions.
So it's like taking mental notes, okay, I'm feeling stressed right now and that's making me snap at my partner. Just acknowledging that connection is a step towards mindsight.
Exactly. You're starting to observe the inner workings of your own mind, which is the foundation of this whole process. The next step is practicing mindfulness, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. Find a quiet space, focus on your breath, and simply notice the sensations, thoughts, and emotions that arise.
I've tried meditation before, and my mind always seems to wander. Is that normal?
Absolutely. The mind is naturally restless. The key isn't to stop thinking, but to notice when your mind has wandered and gently guide your attention back to your breath. It's like training a puppy. It takes patience and repetition.
So it's a practice, not a perfection game. That makes me feel better. Are there any other exercises or techniques that can help us build mindsight?
Yes. Another powerful practice is loving kindness meditation. This involves directing feelings of warmth and compassion toward yourself, then towards others. It might sound a little cheesy, but it's actually been shown to activate those resonant circuits in the brain, strengthening empathy and connection.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. So we've got awareness, mindfulness, and loving kindness meditation. What else can we do?
Well, remember that integration is key. Pay attention to the 8 domains we discussed. Where do you feel disconnected or fragmented in your life? Is it in your relationships, your sense of self, your relationship with time? Once you identify those areas, you can start exploring practices that support integration in those specific domains.
That's a really helpful framework. It feels less overwhelming than just thinking, I need to be more mindful. Instead, I can ask myself, where in my life do I need more connection, more balance? And then explore specific tools to address those needs.
That's a great way to approach it. And remember, this is a lifelong journey. There will be times when you feel more connected and integrated and times when you feel lost and fragmented. The key is to keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep cultivating that remarkable capacity for mindsight that lies within you.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what's possible when it comes to the mind.
Yeah, and the exciting thing is that we've really just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore and discover.
I know, I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep learning and growing and to see where this journey of mindsight takes me.
That's the spirit. And remember, we're all in this together. We're all on this journey of awakening and expanding our minds and hearts.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into mindsight. It's been a truly transformative experience.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
And to all our listeners out there, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep believing in the incredible power of your own minds.
That's it for this deep dive into mindsight. We'll see you next time.